So Bellator 301 is going to be taking place this weekend, and one thing I can tell you is that this is a very, very good card, especially by Bellator standards. Bellator is going to be closing up shop sometime soon. I believe that they're getting acquired by the PFL, and they are really trying to go out with some bangs, man. Their last few cards have been absolutely insane. This is another big one. 2 title fights, some of the biggest names that Bellator has, like AJ Mckee, Ralphion Stotts versus Danny Sabatello in a rematch, as well as some pretty solid prelims by Bellator standards as well. This is going to be a good card. It's going to be a good Bellator card as well, since the UFC card isn't the most stacked card in the world. Yes, it's a good UFC card, but Bellator is really trying to show out with a big card in this one here. Before I do get into my predictions though, you do have my Bet Online and Bet US sign up links there. We can get some bonuses if you look in the description. As well as that, you do have my We Want Picks 3-day free trial. If you sign up using my code ARTEM, you can get a 3-day free trial which you can cancel at any time. $10 a month after that. And you get access to all sorts of things We Want Picks related, such as bets, as well as insight from many different creators on their website, as well as some DraftKings optimizers and tools that helps you make your own bets. And with all of that being said, let's now get into my picks for Bellator 301, Amosov versus Jackson. So kicking off the card is going to be Yves Landu taking on Isao Kobayashi, and this is a very interesting fight because both of these guys, to be fair, are probably getting towards the end of their MMA careers. Yves Landu has been in Bellator for a while, and Isao Kobayashi does have history with Bellator, as he did have a few fights in Bellator before eventually going on a pretty decent run with Shuto, but he hasn't fought for about 2.5 years. Yves Landu has been relatively active. He's fought 5 times in the last 3 years, 3 times in the last 18 months, and has got some good wins over Piotr Nedoletsky and also Walter Cogliandro recently as well. Isao Kobayashi, I would say he's mostly a grappler, but he's very, very low volume on the feet. He's relatively sloppy as well. I'm not really too sure what to expect from him, especially after 2.5 years away. Whereas Yves Landu, we have seen a lot more from him recently. He is a pretty good striker. He can grapple if he needs to as well, but I do believe this fight will probably take place mostly on the feet, where I think that Yves Landu should be throwing a lot more volume than Isao Kobayashi. What I did see from Isao was he's not the most dangerous guy in the world. He doesn't have that many finishes. Most of them are by knockout, but he's just quite low volume on the feet, to be honest with you, and he just doesn't necessarily finish the most amount of opponents, as you can see. I think Yves Landu should be able to outpoint him to a decision in this one here. Just land the more volume, and even then probably will land the better strikes as well. Most people are on Landu 74%, most of them picking him by decision as well. The odds for this fight do have Landu at a -200 favorite, and Kobayashi as +150. The next fight is going to be Ramazan Kuramagomedov taking on Randall Wallace. And Randall Wallace is a pretty interesting signing to me, because to be honest with you guys, I did expect that he was going to get a big promotion step up at some point. He was having a lot of success at Uriah Faber's A1 promotion, where I believe he became the interim champion, beating former UFC fighter Louis Koske, and then that was going to set him up for a fight against the champion at the time. I believe his name was Ozzy Alvarez, and they had a bit of a beef as well, but that fight never materialized. He then went on to fight for the LFA, won that fight there, and here he is in Bellator. I genuinely did expect, I know that he's older, to see Randall Wallace in a bigger promotion, as he did go on a pretty good win streak recently at Uriah Faber's A1 Combat promotion. But to be honest with you, I just don't see him being really good enough to deal with Ramazan Kuramagomedov, who genuinely is a fantastic prospect. I mean, Randall Wallace, he's a dangerous guy. He's got a lot of finishes in round 1. If you do look at this guy, if he's going to finish the fight, it's probably in round 1. He doesn't go the distance all too much either. But to be honest with you, I just think that Ramazan Kuramagomedov is just going to be a little bit too much for him. Wallace is going to be dangerous. He's dangerous on the feet. He's dangerous on the ground. But I think Ramazan Kuramagomedov can kind of do what he wants. I think he can get the takedowns on Wallace. I think he can initiate his grappling on Wallace. He is -700 on Bet Online. Wallace is +500, but he's also -450 on a different sportsbook. Maybe that sportsbook is giving Wallace the respect because he is dangerous, but I just don't see Wallace being able to deal with Ramazan Kuramagomedov's pressure and offensive grappling ability. I see Kuramagomedov eventually getting the win in that one there. The next one is interesting. It is Cody Law taking on Jefferson Pontes, and Cody Law I believe Bellator thought that he was going to be a lot better than he is, because they really did build him up over time. They gave him quite a few winnable matchups, and then he ran into James Gonzalez. Now, James Gonzalez is a tough fighter. Gonzalez has been in there with some really good guys. Yes, he's got quite a few losses, but all of those losses are to some pretty quality opponents. And then he lost a very close split decision to Chris Lencioni, which could have gone Law's way, but Law just didn't really do that much damage. I mean, you could definitely argue that fight to Law. Now, Lencioni at the moment, if you guys are unaware, I believe he's going through a pretty tough health condition at the moment. So my thoughts are with Lencioni. He did bounce back with a step down in competition over Edwin Chavez, but now he's back in there against a prospect, and that prospect is Jefferson Pontes. Jefferson Pontes, I'm going to be honest with you guys, is someone I'm not too sure about. I mean, I could look like a massive idiot here, because if you look at Tapology, 78% of people are picking Pontes. I think that might be a little bit more of a fade on Cody Law, but I'm looking at Jefferson Pontes, and yes, he has really, really good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Search up this guy and then put BJJ at the end of his name. You'll find him doing grappling events for the Brazilian Nationals. He's doing South American trials. He's really, really good at BJJ, and that is what he's quite good at. But if I look at his wins, they look pretty good on paper. But this guy here, Rudy Carvalho, is quite small. He was only 5'3", a lot smaller than Pontes. Was able to have some success on the feet. I think that Cody Law's wrestling is going to be good enough to keep this fight on the feet. And I do believe that Cody Law is going to be the better striker. So although the majority of people on Tapology are picking Pontes to win this fight, Law is still a pretty big favorite. I mean, he's minus 200, minus 160 on one sports book. I wouldn't bet on Cody Law. I mean, maybe you see a bit more in Pontes than me, because I think that Cody Law definitely is a guy to fade in the future. You're just not getting the crazy minus 800 odds that you used to on a Cody Law fight. I do think that Law is going to be able to beat Pontes. The majority of people does disagree with me, but I think that Law should be better at striking than Pontes, and he should be able to defend the takedowns. If Law goes out there and offensively wrestles against Pontes, I think that's a really bad game plan, and my pick will just kind of be wrong by default in that case. Pontes is a great grappler. I think Law is going to be better at striking, although Law did not deal well with the awkward style of Lencioni at all. I think Law can take this one, man. I just wasn't too excited about Pontes. I mean, when I saw Pontes was the underdog, I really thought, man, that's going to be a good pick. I think I should be able to pick him as an underdog, but I just looked into the tape, and I couldn't convince myself to do it. Now we move on to Islam Mamedov taking on Killys Mota. Islam Mamedov should be able to win this one here. The odds are very close, though. You got minus 190 for Mamedov, plus 145 for Mota. I mean, Mota recently has been on a pretty good tear. He's been beating some good guys. He took out Kenneth Cross, who was a pretty hyped up guy going into Bellator. I believe Cross was meant to be on the Ultimate Fighter, but was kicked off by Conor McGregor to make space for one of his guys. He took on a 7-0 guy, Jairo Pacheco, beat him, and he also recently beat Dan Murray, but I would say it's probably not as impressive as these two prospects defeating wins. I think Islam Mamedov should be able to get the takedowns. That's ultimately what he's going to need to do. He did lose a split decision to Benson Henderson, which does kind of have a little bit of a red flag to it. But Henderson, I mean, that was a close fight. And I mean, Henderson got the decision. It really come down to Mamedov just not really doing any damage with his offensive wrestling and grappling. Maybe he could have that happen here. Mota will be doing more damage on the feet. He probably will be the better striker. Like a lot of these guys that do come from that camp and from Dagestan and that area of the world do tend to have decent striking as well as his wrestling. Mamedov's striking doesn't really impress me that much, but his wrestling does. I think he should be able to get it down against Mota. I think he should be able to get the takedowns. I'm going to pick Mamedov to win by decision. Not the most confident pick in the world, but Mota, if he's going to make something happen, it's going to have to be on the feet. The next fight that I move up to is Mike Hamel taking on Tim Wilde. I mean, Mike Hamel has really had a pretty good run recently, you know. He's 11-5 and only 4 fights ago, he was 7-5. I mean, he has really been on a tear. He has been taking out some pretty good fighters. Took out Bryce Logan, Killys Mota, who was fighting on this card just the fight earlier. Nick Brown, knocked out Nick Brown. Very good win for him because I picked Nick Brown to win that matchup. Made me look like a little bit of an idiot. And then he took on the undefeated Shamil Nakayev and won a pretty close competitive decision against him. Tim Wilde is an older guy. He's also a striker for the most part. I think that Mike Hamel should be able to do quite well on the feet against him. Wilde is quite hittable. He can be knocked down. He can be hurt. I like Hamel, man. I mean, Hamel's momentum at the moment is genuinely ridiculous. His takedown defense has improved dramatically. I don't think he's going to have to worry too much about Tim Wilde's wrestling, really. I think this fight is going to mostly take place on the feet, and if anyone is going for takedowns, it probably will be Hamel. I mean, Wilde's been on a run himself, but at the end of the day, he is 36 years old, and I think that Mike Hamel's own momentum is going to just get past Tim Wilde. So that is my pick. I'm picking Mike Hamel to win this one here. Mike Hamel is most likely going to win a decision if he's going to win. He doesn't really get too many finishes. Most of his fights do tend to go the distance, and he does tend to win a lot of decisions there. So give me Mike Hamel to win this fight. I think he keeps it on the feet. Maybe goes for takedowns, though, to be fair. Close favorite is Hamel. He is minus 160 on one sportsbook. Wilde is plus 120, but Hamel is minus 220 on Bet Online. So the odds are a little bit all over the place for the different sportsbooks in that one there. And now we have Matheus Mattos taking on Richard Palencia. I do have an underdog in this fight here. I actually am going to be picking Richard Palencia. This one really could come back to bite me, to be honest with you. But, I mean, I watched Richard Palencia versus Alan Bagoso, and that is a 5-round decision win. And Palencia is a wrestler and a grappler. That is how he gets his fights done. He's not really the best striker in the world. And Alan Bagoso, I mean, he was having a lot of success against Alan Bagoso, and I do rate Alan Bagoso quite highly. Now, Alan Bagoso has gone on to lose a couple of fights. He lost on the Contender Series to Farid Basharat, and then he lost to John Sweeney, who should be in the UFC. John Sweeney's a really good fighter, but Alan Bagoso is a good fighter himself. You know, Alan Bagoso doesn't get the Dana White's Contender Series call for Farid Basharat for no reason, honestly. So that was a good win, a 5-round win. Before that, he really wasn't beating the best competition whatsoever. He wasn't being that active either. He lost by leg injury, whereas we just had a brutal leg injury that kind of snapped. Like, it was just brutal. I mean, I didn't want to watch it again. I don't know why I watched it again. I guess I just wanted to know how Palencia was going to be. And maybe Palencia doesn't come back the same, but I do believe he should be able to get past Matheus Mattos. Now, Matheus Mattos is more of a striker than a grappler. He doesn't really have the best takedown defense, but to be fair, when he was getting taken down a lot, it was by Mamedov, who is a better wrestler than Richard Palencia, as you can imagine. He's got a lot of power on the feet as well, does Mattos, but he just doesn't fight that often himself. He hasn't fought for 2 years, and before that he took a little bit of a break. He got knocked out by Piotr Jan, but Piotr Jan we know is a pretty good fighter, you know. But I think Palencia gets it done as an underdog. I do believe he can get the takedowns against Mattos, who has shown bad takedown defense in the past. I do understand it was to a much better wrestler than Palencia, but I do believe we see Palencia go out there, get the takedowns, try and work his grappling. So I've got Palencia as the underdog in this matchup here. If you look at it, he is plus 175 on Bet Online. Mattos is minus 215. I have the dog. I have the guy coming off a brutal injury in Richard Palencia. Give me him to win. Not the most confident pick in the world, but I do believe he should be a good underdog going into that fight. And now we've got a fight which I'm going to be honest with you guys, I just don't know. Because this fight is really weird for a lot of reasons. It's Keri Taylor-Melendez versus Sabriye Sengul. Now, Keri Taylor-Melendez has a kickboxing background, and so does Sabriye Sengul. But both of them seem to grapple in their pro MMA fights, so they've got good kickboxing backgrounds, but they're grapplers at the same time, if that makes any sense. And Sabriye Sengul recently won against a girl making her debut, who also had a kickboxing background, did Mina Ala Muhammad Abdullah. But I watched that fight, and Mina Abdullah really just didn't look like she knew what she was doing, man. She was throwing wild strikes, she was off balance, and Sabriye Sengul just took her down, kind of in a clinch sort of throw situation, ended up on top. Her opponent couldn't get up, just ground and pounded her out for a win. She's been knocked out before, but here's the kicker. This is the big one. Keri Taylor-Melendez is 39 years old, almost 40, and she hasn't fought for 3 years. I mean, I just don't know what I'm meant to do with this one here, man. I mean, we've got two fighters that haven't fought the best competition, that haven't really fought in a while on the Keri Taylor side. I'm just gonna go with Keri Taylor, to be honest with you. Sengul does seem to actually be quite good at striking, but so does Keri Taylor-Melendez. So I'm going to go with Keri Taylor-Melendez. I don't know why she's taken so long off. On one sports book, Melendez is minus 250. Sengul is plus 175, but just don't bet on this fight. I really don't recommend touching it. Most people are picking Taylor-Melendez, probably because she is undefeated. Not really a bad reason in a situation like this. I mean, this is just a weird fight, honestly. I think it is best to stay away. And the next fight is going to be Archie Colgan versus Peter Buist. If you do know me, you do know that I do quite like Archie Colgan. I think that he's a great fighter. Sorry, the new place that I've moved into, Wi-Fi isn't as fast as the last place, so you have to bear with me, unfortunately. But Archie Colgan, in my opinion, is a really good prospect, and I think that Bellator is moving him up in the right way. They keep giving him fights that is increasing levels of competition. He recently took on the undefeated Justin Montalvo, who's a good boxer. He actually managed to outbox him and get the KO. Very, very good performance from Colgan. And then he took on Emmanuel Sanchez, who I believe is a former UFC fighter. Emmanuel Sanchez, if I can remember the right guy, but I do remember Sanchez was on like a 5-fight losing streak at that point, and he did go out there and beat Emmanuel Sanchez. It still was a step up in competition for Colgan, and now he's taking on Piotr Buist, who is a former ONE championship fighter, and Piotr Buist has signed to Bellator from ONE, and he has stepped into the deep end, man. If you can see, he had these ONE championship fights, lost a couple, signed to Bellator. Who's his Bellator debut? It's Gadzhi Rabadanov, who is a very good fighter at this weight class, very highly ranked in the Bellator rankings, and now they're giving him a up-and-coming prospect, 8-0, a guy that can wrestle, a guy that can box. I think that we see Archie Colgan put on a pretty complete performance against Piotr Buist. Now, Buist is a good striker, and he definitely will test Colgan in the striking, and he can grapple as well. He can grapple offensively and defensively, so Colgan will have quite a lot to worry about in this matchup. But to be honest with you, I still see Archie Colgan mixing up the boxing with the wrestling in this matchup and being able to get past Piotr Buist. I think that he's going to be able to get it done by decision. If you look at the odds, Archie Colgan is minus 1,000 on Bet Online, minus 650 on this other sports book. Buist is a massive underdog. I'm not minus 1,000 confident in Colgan, but I do think he wins by decision in this fight, so he is my pick. And in this next fight, we've got Timur Khizriev taking on Justin Gonzalez. And this is going to be a bit of a test for Timur Khizriev because to Justin Gonzalez's credit, he does have incredible takedown defense, but it wasn't enough for him to defeat Mads Burnell. I picked Mads Burnell in that fight. I believe quite a few people were very unhappy with that pick because they also said that Gonzalez was going to be able to defend the takedowns, but ultimately he wasn't really able to defend all of that offensive wrestling that Mads Burnell did bring to the table, and Timur Khizriev has that similar style. He is a guy that goes out there, gets takedowns. He's a little bit of a lay and pray guy. He does like to spend time in top position, and to be honest with you guys, he's not the most exciting fighter to watch when he is winning the way that he wants to win, but he is very good at doing what he's doing. He's got a relatively short reach, which does help him get in there with his takedown attempts. And if you see, he beat Richie Smellin, who's a pretty good fighter from Ireland, a former The Ultimate Fighter contestant, and a guy that just has kind of been going through it and winning some good fights before coming back into Bellator. He beat Daniel Weichel, who is that German guy that looks kind of like Drake, but to be fair, Weichel has had an unreal career, very, very long career. I believe Weichel made his debut around the period of time when I was born. That tells you how old Weichel is and how long he's been around. But before that, he was beating decent guys. I mean, at the time for his record, he had a fight for Khabib Nurmagomedov's promotion as well, Eagle FC, a couple of years ago. Gonzalez, he's a good wrestler, he's a decent striker, potentially could be the better striker in this matchup, to be honest with you guys, because we don't see the most striking from Khizriev. He's a wrestler, Khizriev's a wrestler, he loves to camp on full mount, in half guard, on top. I think he does that in this fight, to be honest. I do believe he gets the takedowns. If he does win, it's not going to be the most exciting fight. He's minus 350 as a favorite. Gonzalez is plus 240. I see Khizriev getting the takedowns and winning the fight, so give me him to win that matchup there. And now we can move on to Denise Kielholtz taking on Sumiko Inaba. This is another fight, man, which is the female MMA fights, on the women's MMA fights, I should say, on this Bellator card. Just, man, they are hard to pick. And this is another one because Denise Kielholtz is a good striker. She is from the Netherlands. She does have a kickboxing background. She has shown it off in Bellator in the past, and she has beaten some really good fighters and lost to some really good fighters as well. She lost to Juliana Velasquez in a split decision, and then she lost to Kana Watanabe, and then she lost to Alara Joanne. And Kana Watanabe and Juliana Velasquez are either former champion for Velasquez, and I believe a challenger for Kana Watanabe. I believe she challenged for the title, or she is in Ryzen. I could be wrong there. Sumiko Inaba is a girl that the Bellator has really been trying to build up, and they've been building her up over a pretty long period of time. They've had her signed for pretty much her whole career. She beat an opponent that was 1-1, and then she beat Randy Field, who was 2-0, a wrestler from Canada, and then they gave her a couple girls with losing records. I mean, the fight against Nadine Mandiel was a bit of a red flag for me because Inaba really should have looked better in that performance, but she did beat Vita Arteaga. I'm going to be honest, I actually think Denise Kielholtz does win this fight. I think that she can beat Inaba. I'm going to pick her to win, and the real main reason for that is I understand that Bellator is trying to build up Inaba to be a star. I think that they see something in Sumiko Inaba, but I think that Kielholtz can upset her. This is a low confidence pick, but Inaba throughout her whole career, I'm watching her fight girls that Bellator's really trying to set her up to beat, and she just isn't really impressing me all that much. And I do believe that she's ran into someone now who has the experience against high-level competition. Kielholtz is -105 on Bet Online, +130 on another sportsbook, and Inaba is a slight favorite. So we're going with a very slight underdog in Kielholtz here. This could be another fight which just makes me look a little bit silly picking the dog. But I'm going to be honest with you guys, I just am not that sold on Inaba. This is probably another fight I wouldn't really recommend that you bet on, to be fair. And now we have Tyrell Fortune taking on Marcelo Golm. Marcelo Golm made me look a little bit silly in his last fight because he got knocked out by Daniel James. Daniel James, man, was meant to be on this card. Unfortunately, Ali Isao failed a PED test. So now we're going to get no Daniel James, potentially, unless they find a short-notice replacement. But James, man, come over to Bellator, over 40 years old, and he is knocking everybody out. It is absolutely crazy how Marcelo Golm is, Daniel James is doing in Bellator, but that's not who this is about. You've got Tyrell Fortune taking on Golm. Golm's actually a former UFC fighter. I believe he went on a bit of a losing streak way back in the day in 2019, and he built his way back up. He's now back into Bellator, but what Marcelo Golm does do is he's a grappler at heavyweight. He's relatively athletic as well, relatively young for heavyweight, only 31 years old, and Tyrell Fortune is a wrestler. If you watch his fight against Daniel James, Tyrell Fortune this is, he takes on Daniel James, and Daniel James hits him with some pretty bad illegal shots to the back of the head in a finishing sequence. In that fight, though, Fortune was able to take the back of James, was threatening a rear naked choke, and then he takes on Sergey Biastini, and I believe I did pick Tyrell Fortune in that fight, and I got very lucky that they actually called the back of the head shots for Sergey Biastini when they didn't do it for Daniel James, because I ended up winning that pick, and I was about to lose that pick because he was about to get knocked out if Sergey was able to keep the fight a little bit more clean. It seems like everyone else is fading Golm. I'm also fading Golm. I mean, I think Marcelo Golm has a legitimate chance of winning this fight. I mean, these guys are pretty highly ranked heavyweights for Bellator, but I still would consider this maybe one of those heavyweight fights to avoid. Fortune is a favorite, -170, Golm's +140. I mean, this fight, in my opinion, either ends by Fortune getting a knockout or Golm getting a submission, but I don't see Golm being able to pull off offensive takedowns against Tyrell Fortune, where I think Fortune can take down Golm, if that makes sense. So it's going to be an interesting fight. Someone is very much going to be getting finished, and then we can move on to Patricky Pitbull taking on Alexander Shabalai. Alexander Shabalai is a guy that I'm very impressed with. I think this guy is the real deal. Fantastic striker. He can wrestle as well. But my goodness, this guy is a fantastic fighter. I do believe that he's going to finish Patricky Pitbull in this tournament bout here. Since we've got the tournament semi-finals, and Usman Nurmagomedov failed a PED test, I don't know what they're going to do with the lightweight finals now. I mean, who knows? But Shabalai is going to win this one here. I'm pretty confident in him getting it done. He knocked out Tafik Masayev, who's legitimate. He knocked out Brent Primus, who's legitimate. He beat Bobby King, who's got a very awkward style, an older guy, but a very awkward style. And Patricky Pitbull, I mean, recently he beat Roberto de Souza, which was cool because Roberto de Souza, I believe, fought for Ryzen. and is a very good grappler. But I mean, we saw Tricky Pitbull take him out, which is cool. Lost to Usman Nurmagomedov in a performance where Usman just kind of controlled the striking and the wrestling. Just won that fight in general. I've got Sabatello by knockout. I do believe Sabatello gets it done here. How many times have I said that in this one breakdown? Too many times, but I'm picking Sabatello. Minus 600 on Bet Online. He's minus 450 on Betway. Sabatello's a big favourite. I'm picking him as a massive favourite. I think he gets it done. And now we have AJ Mckee Jr. taking on Sydney Outlaw. And this is going to be a pretty tough test for AJ Mckee as he does continue his run at 155 pounds. I liked AJ Mckee at 145 a lot more than AJ Mckee at 155 pounds. I thought that he looked really good. I mean, he went 18-0 at 145 for Bellator. I believe his whole career has been taking place in Bellator, but then he did lose to Patricio Pitbull in a pretty competitive close fight. Moved up to 155, took on Spike Carlisle. That fight was absolutely wild from the get-go. I mean, if you want someone to put on an entertaining fight, call up Spike Carlisle because he will put on a show. My goodness, that was absolutely wild, that fight, especially from the start as well. And then he beat Roberto de Souza, that grappler from Ryzen. I believe that was the Bellator versus Ryzen card at New Year's. And he was just able to stay safe on top against de Souza and control the striking in that matchup as well, as de Souza was kind of trying to pull guard, get the fight down to the ground any way he could. Now, Sydney Outlaw is a guy that can mix it up. He's a dangerous wrestler with good grappling and with good power. He has beaten good guys. He beat Islam Mamedov recently. He did lose to Tafik Masayev, but Outlaw is a guy that has had a pretty good career, and he's still young. He's still in his prime. He's not 32 years old yet. Very good grappler, very good wrestling background as well. I do believe that AJ Mckee, if he can defend the takedowns and keep the fight on the feet, I believe he will be the better striker. If you look at Mckee, though, he's very well-rounded, got a very even mix of KO wins and submission wins, and he actually hasn't got a KO win since 2019. The last time he knocked out anybody was Georgi Karakanyan, when he knocked him out in 8 seconds. That's the last time we saw a KO win from AJ Mckee. Now that he has moved up to 155, we'll see if he kind of gains a bit more power. He's been at 155 for a year, so hopefully his frame has really built into it now. I'm going with Mckee. I am actually picking Mckee by KO. I believe he can get it done over Outlaw. I think it will probably be a second or third round knockout. He's going to have to deal with the takedowns of Outlaw, but I think if he can defend the takedowns and punish Outlaw while the fight is on the feet, I think that we see Mckee have a lot of success. So give me Mckee to win by KO, his first KO win since 2019. Now we can move on to Raufeon Stots taking on Danny Sabatello in a rematch. And the original fight, it wasn't that good, to be honest. I mean, I understand why they're rematching, because Danny Sabatello has a big mouth, and Raufeon Stots and him, I believe, have still a beef. All this time later, after he lost to Raufeon Stots in that fight, it was a split decision. One of the judges gave it 50-45 to Sabatello, and the other judges gave that fight to Raufeon Stots. It was a fight where there was a lot of wrestling, a lot of control, a little bit of damage when the fighters were in dominant positions. It honestly just wasn't really that great. If you know Danny Sabatello, he talks a big game, and his fights just don't really deliver, if that makes sense. He does win most of his fight. I mean, he's got a good record, beating some good guys. He's a wrestler. Got his first finish in a very, very long time over Marcos Breno, when I famously said Danny Sabatello doesn't finish anybody. He's not finishing Marcos Breno, and guess what he does? He finishes Marcos Breno, and I believe his first finish win in years, I want to say. I mean, he hadn't finished anybody since 2020 at that point, and he had taken on some good guys. I mean, he beat Damon Blackshear. But that's what Sabatello does. He's a wrestler, and that's all he does. He goes for control. Raufeon Stots is pretty similar. Very good wrestler himself. He did lose to Patchy Mix, who is going to be on this card soon, and I'll talk about him soon because I really like Patchy Mix. But he beat a couple good guys, beat Mamedov, beat Josh Hill as well back in the day when Josh Hill was kind of going on a bit of a run. But I believe that we see Raufeon Stots just win again. He won the first fight. This next fight is going to be at 3 rounds. The original one was 5. I think that Stots can once again kind of try and reverse the takedowns. He should be the better striker again in this matchup as well. I think Stots wins a decision based on damage. I mean, these guys are very evenly matched. I understand why they're doing the rematch, but to be honest with you guys, they're not really going to put on a great fight. I mean, they could because they don't like each other, but in the past, in the original fight, it wasn't amazing. And I don't really expect this one to be amazing either. I've got Stotts. I mean, Stotts is a slight favorite, -120, -150 on some sports books. And Sabatello is a very slight underdog. Sabatello recently did lose to Mamedov, but Stotts, I'm going to go with Stotts. Close fight. It's going to be a good one. And now we can move on to Sergio Pettis taking on Patchy Mix. If you guys don't know, I'm a big fan of Patchy Mix, man. I believe that Patchy Mix is one of, if not the best, bantamweight in the world. And yes, I am willing to put that out there. I do believe that Patchy Mix is better than most fighters in the UFC. I believe that Patchy Mix is one of the best bantamweights in the world. But to back up that claim, and to prove me right, or prove me horribly wrong, he has to perform against Sergio Pettis, and I do believe that he does beat Sergio Pettis. If you don't know anything about Patchy Mix, he is absolutely massive for this weight class. He's 5'11", got a pretty filled up 5'11" frame as well. He is a grappler, but he recently got that massive KO win over Alfion Stotts with a big knee. Absolutely huge KO win in round number 1, pretty early into the round as well, in 90 seconds. Massive for the weight class. Did I say that? I think I said it twice already. Very good grappler, very good wrestler. He's taking on Sergio Pettis, and Sergio Pettis is coming off, in my opinion, his best performance of recent. He took on Patricio Pitbull, and he beat Patricio Pitbull over 5 rounds. That was the situation where Patricio Pitbull was coming down to 135 pounds for the first time in his career. Pitbull, a former champion at 155, 145, and he was trying to be the triple champ. And Pettis defended his belt and honestly looked really, really good in that fight. Now, you could put it down to Pitbull being a little bit drained, but to be honest with you, yes, Pitbull did look drained. I'm not going to ignore that fact at all, but Pettis just had a very good all-around performance. Very good, completely controlled the striking on the feet, and it seemed like Pitbull just didn't really have anything for him. Prior to that, he did beat Kyoji Horiguchi by a crazy spinning back fist KO in a fight that he was losing, and he has beaten Juan Archuleta, who is now fighting for Ryzen. I think Patchy Mix gets the finish here. I think Patchy Mix can get the submission. I do respect the fact that Sergio Pettis is a fantastic grappler himself and does have a very good grappling background. But at this point, man, I'm all in on Patchy Mix at this point. I think that he can get the finish. I think he's dangerous everywhere. He's dangerous on the feet. Showed that against Stotts. He's dangerous on the ground. If Pettis can somehow keep this on the feet and control the striking, that's probably his best way to win. I know that Pettis is a good offensive grappler, but I don't know if you really want to grapple with Patchy Mix. Maybe if this fight gets extended and it goes late, Patchy Mix is going to have a very tough weight cut. He always does, especially to 135. Instead of getting that 1 pound allowance at 136. I'm going with Patchy Mix. I think he gets it done. He's a pretty sizable favorite considering Sergio Pettis' status as the champion. Mix as the interim champion and challenger for the title is -275. Pettis is +220 on Pinnacle Sportsbook is the reference I'm using here. But on Bet Online, he's -285, +225 for Pettis in this matchup. And now we can move on to the main event. Yaroslav Amosov taking on Jason Jackson. Now, I've got to give some credit to Jason Jackson, because my goodness, this guy has been on a run recently, dude. He's been beating some pretty good guys. And if you do look at his record, he recently beat Douglas Lima, who, to be fair, isn't super old. I thought he was going to be a little bit older than he was. He was 35. He beat a 38-year-old Paul Daly. Took out a Naaman Gracie, who has been dangerous, but recently hasn't been looking all that great. Beat Benson Henderson as well, and his last loss was in 2019, so he has not lost in 4 years, but he's taken on a man who has never lost in Yaroslav Amosov, who recently come back after a pretty long period of time away. He defeated Douglas Lima, but then he did go out to serve Ukraine, and then come back after doing that. After a little bit of a break, beat Logan Storley in a fight, which he won by unanimous decision after beating Logan Storley by split decision a few years prior. So he went out there, defeated a guy that gave him problems in the past, and I believe that he is going to be able to go out there and defeat Jason Jackson. Amosov is a very dominant fighter, unbelievable 27-0 record, with Bellator being acquired by the PFL and potentially contracts being, potentially with fighters becoming available for the UFC. I really want the UFC to go out there and try and acquire Yaroslav Amosov if he does win this fight and he is my pick to win this fight. I do believe that he goes out there against Jason Jackson, gets the takedowns, uses the wrestling, uses his offensive grappling to his advantage, because that is his easiest path to victory when it comes down to a matchup against Jason Jackson. As you can see, most of Amosov's wins are very early in the fight, but they're all very early in his career when he just wasn't fighting anyone that great, to be honest with you. In fact, it took a long time for Amosov to fight someone with a lot of skill, and now that he has been taking on the very tough guys in Bellator, he's winning by decision. I think he does win by decision over Jason Jackson as well. Dominates with his offensive wrestling and grappling. So give me Amosov, minus 400 on Betway, minus 350 on Bet Online. You're getting quite a bit of tax with the 27-0 fighter, but man, I do hope he wins as a massive, massive record. I mean, 27-0 is unbelievable. I want to see him in the UFC. Hopefully we can see that. But the number one fighter that I want in the UFC after Bellator does kind of get acquired or it disappears, whatever happens, is Patchy Mix. I really, really want to see Patchy Mix in the UFC because I believe he could truly shake things up in the UFC's bantamweight division. And with all of that being said, let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. That is my breakdown and predictions for every single fight on the Bellator 301 card, Amosov versus Jackson. I'll see you guys in the next one.